Visual Studio Code with Salesforce. Visual Studio Code is an open source and free editor, and it is available from Microsoft. It's built with web technology using Electron, so JavaScript, CSS, and HTML are the core technologies driving VS Code. So it's pretty cool. Cross-platform, available pretty much anywhere. I don't believe there's a portable version, so unfortunately if your computer has particular requirements to get it installed, you may need to contact your IT department to get it installed. One of the applications that comes and works very nicely with VS Code is the Salesforce command line interface, Salesforce CLI. There are trailheads galore on how to install and configure. I'm not going to cover that. What I kind of wanted to do though is go into a little bit more of tips and tricks that can be used for purposes of VS Code and the CLI. So I have installed the Salesforce extensions here in my VS Code. And you can also see it has the Salesforce CLI. Again, trailheads can totally help in getting you up to speed with that. One of the benefits of having VS Code is the ability to browse your entire org. So here I've connected to a developer org that I created, and it is in effect a production org for purposes of wiring up VS Code when you go to authorize an org. Again, I recommend the trailhead on how to create a project and how to authorize the org. Right, so I can go and browse through all the objects that I have in my environment. I can download them locally as XML. It's really super cool. Well, as part of that, I also have the ability to query the actual org. You say, what do you mean query? Well, let's create a new file, and I'm just going to name this my org name .soql. The extension is very important here, so .soql, and now I'm going to save that inside my sandbox here. I'll just put it in basically my root structure, and what you're going to notice happen is I've got a little bit of some squiggles, so something's trying to talk to this file, something's trying to say something, and over here I've got another cute little icon with kind of some arrows there, switch between the builder and the text editor. So I'm going to really just start typing here, select, and I get Automagic IntelliSense. Now, what do I want to select? Well, that's manual, and you're like, I'm not that great with SOQL yet. I really am just starting to get going. What could be better here? Well, what could be better is switching over to the Visual Builder. So let's get rid of our org browser. Let's give us some real estate back. And we don't need to see the welcome screen. Right now, we have the pure text version here and the builder version here. Now you can keep clicking back and forth, but it's basically just two different tabs. So now this is going to query already the schema of my org and give me anything that I've got in there. Super cool. I don't have to go hunting through the setup, through the gear, through the object manager. Nope. It's all right here. So this is super powerful and super cool, and all within VS Code. Right. So I've created a table or two that I'm using for some videos as well as just to play around with, and I think I called it lookup. Oh, okay. So I've got apparently two sets of tables, a lookup SFDC opportunity, a lookup SFDC test. Or let's just try the test table. I'm not really sure what's in there just yet. and I want to look at the data, and yeah, this is just a select. So if I run this, I'm not going to get any results. Error, there's no results. And that's correct because there's no fields that I'm asking for. With SQL, there's no select star like you have with SQL Server. Disappointing, and that's okay because this is the way they do what they do, but I can do all fields. And now I can run my query. And magically, I'm getting all of my data. So there's 10 rows here. That's it. It's a small table. It's a small object. But I've got all my data. I can now put this out to CSV, and I could save it. I could open it back up in my VS Code if I so choose, and I could look at the CSV. I'm going to trust this file. Everything's fine. And there it is. I could open this in Excel. And there's the data. Cool. This is interesting. This is all in VS Code. This is powered by the Salesforce CLI and the extension pack. So if you haven't tried this out, I recommend you do this. There is the Workbench website where you can query and do everything there too. There are some really powerful GitHub. There's one GitHub site that I think offers a lot of good stuff. But right now, this is me on my computer targeting my org. That's how I know I'm connected. And I'm able to get at the data. Now, if I wanted to do data manipulation, this is where this gets really fun. So I've got query results. I've got my CSV. I've got my query that's being written over here in text. And you could say, okay, well, if I have a lot, let me wrap this. So we'll word wrap it. So I've got a lot of fields. Maybe you've got a huge object and there are a lot more fields there. Well, would you want to sit here and click away X and X and X? You don't have to. Go back into text. I want to have let's do the customer industry. Let's keep that. And let's keep the SLA, the customer type, and the ID. The rest I want gone. I don't want anything else. I have actually, you know what? I want pick list values. I think we'll try that as well. So we'll keep that. We'll get rid of that. Make sure you put your commas in. So it's very much similar to SQL syntax. And as I learned through many of the trailheads, Salesforce is built on top of Oracle, which is intriguing. And it's got its own object type of syntax with SQL syntax, as well as another query engine that it has for just searches and not really the SQL syntax. I think it's SOSL. So anyways, yeah, this is cool. This is just, okay, now I've got a much cleaner number of columns, and this is great. And let's say I wanted to update some of this data. Well, can I update it directly from within here? SQL, per the trailheads, is a read-only concept. So it's a read-only select concept. You're not allowed to do inserts or updates or deletes. To do that, you're looking at the DML, which is their data management language, and that's kind of Apex-y type of stuff. Now, if you've written a flow before, you can do that, so that's really cool with flows, but I just have 10 rows here. I want to clean some things up. Maybe I want to fix some things. How could I do that? How could I do that really easily and simply for purposes of working with Salesforce data? Well, a little bit of a trick here that I found is if I leave my VS Code and I head over to my org. All right. So here I am in my org, and I have the core set up at the home with the object manager, standard fare, right? And we could go and we could create a list view and edit the data that way through a list view. But, I don't want to take the time to build that. Maybe there's another way. So with 10 rows, there is another way. I'm going to use the Dev Console. I say, what are you going to use the Dev Console for? What is a Dev Console? So The Dev Console is Salesforce approach to allowing you to interrogate the data layer. It's pretty nice from a standpoint of giving you that core CRUD concept here, and I'll show you that in a second. But it's, it's not elegant by any scope of the imagination, but it works. And it's a quick and dirty way to get what you need. So let's flip back here and say, well, I've got my query and I want to edit some of this information. Now, one of the things you have to guarantee is the ID, the unique ID of the record. You're going to want to have that if you're going to do any CRUD work, create, retrieve, update, delete with the object data. So you could say, all right, well, I've got that. What's our next steps? I can highlight this, or I can go over here, Control A, Control C, if you're on a Mac, the command and all that jazz. I click the query editor here. I'm going to paste that query that I just created now from VS Code. So I didn't have to hunt, I didn't have to look, I didn't have to scrape through the setup tab and go into the object manager and go to that object and copy and paste. No, it's all built right through VS Code. So I'm here now and I'm going to execute this query. And here's my data. Now, I don't know if you haven't seen the trailhead before, but the trailhead talks about this being an editable grid. And sure enough, if you double click inside that cell, you can make changes. So you can save the rows, you can insert no rows, you can delete rows. So here I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say always. I'll change this one, platinum, to always. I really don't know what I'm doing with my data right now. I don't remember what this was for. I know it's for testing, so I'm not really worried. But you notice there's a little red marker here, almost like an Excel. You've got a comment or whatever. That tells you that this row can now be saved, that this information will go back into the database. So let's save that row. Red marker's gone. Let's refresh the grid, which we already have. And okay, well, that didn't prove anything, but the data is there. So what else could we do? Well, let's close this and let's reopen it. Let's close it. Let's go back to our Dev Console and let's say, okay, well, do I have under the query editor? I've got nothing. There's nothing up my sleeve here. Let's rerun our query. Let's execute, and the data persisted. So this is an easy way if you need to do onesie twosies or small things to edit your data. Pretty cool. So a lot of other opportunities to play around with this, a lot of other things that can be done, but now this is VS Code working with the Dev Console, being able to quickly go back and forth and modify some things. Right, so let's do one more step and then we'll have our video here for purposes of this tutorial of sorts. I've got these rows. I've already put them to CSV. I want to change that value back. I didn't modify it here. I haven't rerun the query. Let's rerun the query. Let's take a look at that. So let's close up our query results. We'll close those up. Let's run that query again. Let's see what we get here. And we get the always go. So it definitely took. But I didn't like what I did. I said, nah, you know what? I don't want to put that always go in there. But I still have my original CSV. Now again, this is for 10 rows. It's not a lot, but it could be helpful. So what else could we do here? So back with VS Code here, we want to use a different way to update this. And instead of seeing a lot of extra columns, which we don't need, let's go ahead and let's trim our query some more. So we don't need the SLA, we don't need the customer type, we don't need the industry. We're going to take the ID and the pick list values, and we're going to run that. So here we go, and now we are preserving always go, which was the one that we changed before. But we don't want that anymore. We want to turn it back to what it was originally, which is go. So let's save this, and let's overwrite the one we have. Now we could still use the one we have, but the issue with that is there's a lot of extra columns. So now we could certainly edit those columns out. That's not a problem. We could strip that down, but we're making one change here. You say, well, why would you do one change when you can do it right this is true. I just wanted to show another approach to how this could be done. So let's go here. Let's save this. Let's keep this very simple. And we're going to go CSV. And we'll save it. Yep, I'm going to overwrite it. So now we come in here and we can see this has been changed. So let's change this back to just go, which it was originally. And we'll save it. So now we've got the ID that we're going to use and the pick list values that we want to map. So let's see if we can update just these two and do it through a different approach, which is going to be the wizard approach. So we type in wizard here and we get the data import wizard. Now the data import wizard allows us to update information in a bulk fashion, if you will. So we're going to go to custom objects. We're going to go to our lookup SFDC test. We are going to update existing records. We have to match it based on the Salesforce ID. And this is going to then be our next step to say, okay, let's pick up our CSV, which only has 2 columns in it. And let's click next. And now what we can see here is we need to map the pick list value to pick values. We're going to map that. And we're now going to run this. And we're going to start the import. Now we can go back to our Dev Console and we can attempt to run that query. We can see executed or history. This one's clean, so let's go ahead and paste that query in. Gotta grab it again from our VS Code. I could just get it here, or I could just go here. Either way is fine. And let's get there. Let's execute it. And now you can see this was the ID with that, and now it's been changed back to go. So let's go and run that in our VS Code. And we can see here the query results was always go for the 5UQ. Let's run it. And now it's been changed to go. So you've got a lot of power here with VS Code. You have a lot of power with the Salesforce CLI as well as the extension. It can be helpful for data manipulation, certainly querying objects that you've never dealt with before and getting valuable information out of, as well as being able to put it to CSV and as well for documentation purposes. I hope this was helpful. Thanks.